Hey guys, welcome back to Rebuild Reality. So today we're going to do something different, and I want to do a couple of things. And one of them is I want to update you on things that are happening with me. And two, I want to actually recommend some other people to you guys. I want to give some shout outs to some people that are here on YouTube who I think are also in this same headspace as me. So, because, we all need different perspectives, don't we? That's how we kind of correlate everything and put it together. And I find that it's obviously really helpful. So the first one would be Kearin from the Be Something Wonderful channel. And, Tom's great. He's very enthusiastic, very knowledgeable. He's obviously been around for a while. I'm sure there's probably quite a few of you out there who are aware of Kearin and his channel. And he's like kind of one of those people that not only is it informative, but he's really good for like a pick-me-up, He's like, rah, 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 So sometimes he gets into it, but he's enthusiastic, So I find a lot of his videos are can be very inspiring to people. So he's a bit more I guess in the kind of the spiritual mindset, as opposed to connecting all the things, that we're talking about reality creation, about manifestation and all of these things, about your true identity. He tends to say them a bit more in, I guess, spiritual terms, not quite in 3D terms as much, but he's quite good. And, if you haven't heard of him yet, if you haven't seen any of Kearin's stuff on his Be Something Wonderful channel, go ahead and check him out. And then the reason that what kind of inspired me to do this in the first place is because there's two other people that have come up recently. My channel started about 4 or 5 months ago, and then the other two people, one of them started about 2 months ago, and the other one just started I think about a week and a half ago, maybe. And the first one is a guy named Eric, who has a channel called The Power of I Am. And Eric's a very kind of inspiring person as well. He's like knows what he's talking about kind of thing, But what I like about him is that it's that kind of no bull kind of stuff, because that's the reason I like both him and this other guy I'm going to mention, is because it's this straightforward approach, So Eric has that kind of approach. And also it's interesting because he recommended somebody else on his channel, which I love that he did that, I really like that he did that. Someone who he's really kind of connecting with and finding kind of inspiring too, is a guy named Zach, who has a channel called Zachary Hickory. It's Zakari, and the next word is Hikari. And I will try and remember to put links to these people down in the description box in case you want to check them out. And I like these two because they're in the same headspace as me, It's more of a just say it like it is, because in all my years working in the spiritual field and spirituality and, and on the journey and all of that stuff, trying to figure it out, which to me, it was just a re-remembering, because I'm like, why do I know these things? Why do I know these things, but I don't see anybody else? And that was really I think we get down to it, that was really the problem, was that I'm like, I know these things, but I have no confirmation, like either zero or very little confirmation of what I know in my heart is true. So it was trying to find those things, right? And like I said, so much of it is that people talk about is it's not straightforward. It's like, it's mystical, or it's covered in these veils of the mysterious and, unknowable and stuff. And it's like, well, that's great. And it's great to know those things and stuff. But what difference is it going to make to me in my life? If I can't apply it and understand it in a 3D way, if my conscious mind can't get it and use it, then, it's not something that can really help me. Otherwise it's a forever never-ending journey of like being in, meditating in a cave in the Himalayas for 30 years, and you know what happens to that guy? Well, nothing happens. He finally gets sick and tired of doing it and leaves, and then he gets it because he finally gave it up, right? Gave up insisting that, it was going to happen that way. So I like that, the real 3D, you can grab it, crunch it, take a bite of it and chew it kind of stuff, that it hits you between the eyes, So, it drove me nuts when I was going through it, because no one would ever I'm like, just say it. Just tell me. Just freaking tell me if you know. You're telling me so just tell me. And it was just this kind of backwards, oh, well, you kind of, and you're like, which is why I always try to talk as plainly and as straightforward as I can, because I'm like, how else are you going to get it? How else are you going to really apply it to your life if it's not in that kind of language, if it's not in the 3D level understanding? Because that's just where we are, right? We're just in this experience. So any understandings have to kind of integrate with this experience. And that's why I like Eric and Zach, because they're coming from that kind of perspective where it's like, we're just going to say it. We're just going to say it, we're all saying it. It's like, you are the one. It's just a matter of who you identify as. And that's just going to be your life. Bye-bye. Like you're it. There is nothing else but that. Because we're in this illusion that we're all these separate beings when we're not, And I actually had a friend of mine, when I told her I was going to do this, she's like, you can't go on your channel and tell people about other channels. And I'm like, well, why not? She's like, well, you want to lose people, have them go to their channels. And I'm like, well, if I lose people, I'm like, well, first of all, no one's mine. But if I lose people, well, they were never mine to begin with. Either you resonate with somebody or you don't. And I'm like, well, then they would just move on anyway if they didn't resonate with what I have to say and the way that I say it. So that's why I'm like, well, because it's just one thing. We're all one thing. They're no different than me. They're other aspects of me, and I love that they're showing up. And I think it's really interesting too, because I started my channel, like I was saying, about 4 or 5 months ago. Eric started his about 2 months ago. And now Zach started his so recently. And I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? Because once you get into any space, that's a newer space for you, suddenly all those things are going to come up, and I'm like, so I'm just sitting here going, oh, okay, who else is going to show up? Who else that gets it like this? Because in all these years, I haven't met or found anyone that gets it like this, where it's just smack in your face. That's just it. Don't need to know anything else. It's just blah, blah, blah. You either accept it or you don't, You're either going to go round and round and round in these stories, or you're just going to accept that you are the creator of your reality. And what you talk about in your head all day long is just you're writing your script. Every single day, you're writing the story. You're writing the story. So until we change that self-talk, until we change our identity, well, then the life doesn't change. It's getting rid of those old stories about being not good enough, not worthy, not smart enough, not being loved enough, not accepted, not being popular, nobody liking you, or not the right kind of people liking you, or you always get XYZ. Oh, this always happens to me in relationships, or that always happens to me at jobs. It's like, well, if you're saying it, it's just that simple, I don't think that I or they want to wrap it into any kind of mysticism, because I'm sure that that's what they found out as well, is that anyone who does, you finally realize, well, if you're not, just tell me. If you can't just tell me in plain language, if it's not simple, then it's not it. And a lot of times I had to come to the conclusion, I'm like, well, people who are not making it simple, understandable, they either are hiding it or they don't actually know themselves. Because why wouldn't you? Why would you not just make it plain and simple? Oh, and I don't know if I mentioned him yet. Joseph Rodriguez is also another good one, which many people I'm sure know as well. Joseph has been around for a long time. He's got a nice way of seeing things that's really helpful too. Who else? Well, those are kind of like the modern ones that I'm aware of that are good. Zach and Eric are kind of like the same, like I said, same mind space as I am. Tom Kearin and Joseph Rodriguez have a bit more of the coming up through the different spiritual teachings kind of viewpoint on this stuff, but also very good. Who else do I think is great? Well, I think Dr. Joseph Murphy is great. Obviously, he's not around in our current perception here anymore. But of course, if you don't know who he was also a student of Abdullah's, just like Neville Goddard was, which I'm pretty sure everyone knows who Neville is. But the reason I like Joseph Murphy is because he just said it. He just was so, he's like, okay, if your problem is health, blah, 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 here you go. If your problem is money, blah, 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 here you go. If your problem is relationships, if your problem is this, if your problem is that, he like spelled it out, which can be really helpful in a lot of ways. And he was very much in the, well, tell yourself this, basically rewire your subconscious mind, which it works, it works. So I find that he, for me, he was a really helpful, person along the way and stuff. He's not coming from this same mindset, where just telling it like it is. Although he does in a lot of ways, not quite to this degree that I try to do, but I don't think that you really could that much then, because he was around in the last century and stuff, and I think he died I think it was like 1984 or something like that. But anyway, good teacher. So I just want to recommend those people for you guys, in case they help you, because if I'm here to help you, well, you either are or you're not. It kind of runs across all fronts, because we're all just one thing, I help you guys is helping myself. So, and I recognize that. Okay, so the other thing I want to talk about is stuff that's going on with me. So one of the reasons that I'm kind of putting these things together is they're actually kind of related, because Eric and Zach were talking about creating characters, about creating characters that you could play. And I could see that as being like a really good idea for a lot of people, because they don't like the character they're playing. It's like, well, you want to be somebody else. And if you could be someone else that's kind of a recognizable thing or something you can understand, in a 3D sense, that a lot of times people can see that. It's like, I understand that, and I can see how I could play that role instead of seeing myself as who I am, right? Because a lot of people they're like, well, it's hard for me to see myself as the creator of all things. It's like, well, so we tend to make up better versions of ourselves. It's like, well, I'm not going to be that person anymore. I'm going to be this version of myself, that has these things, but we're still playing us, right? So their ideas, one of them was like, hey, if it appeals to you, if it's your kind of thing, one thing you could do is you could play a villain, right? Which means that you can make up your own backstory and stuff and get into this place of, if you feel powerless, of feeling powerful. And then the other one was talking about, well, no, that could come with some problems, because if you're playing the villain, well, what happens to villains, right? Because when you're taking on a role, you're not only taking on that character, you're taking on everything that goes with that character. You're taking on all, the background scenery, you're taking on the supporting characters, you're taking on what happens to that person because you're playing that role. You see yourself as playing that role. So in your mind, you could see it as your subconscious mind, although of course mind is just all one thing. But the part that's running the show is like, oh, is that who you want to be? Okay, well, here's everything that goes with that, right? So he was saying, well, no, it'd be better to play the hero. I think that we should play the hero, And it's like, yeah, that is a great idea, because, and he was giving these examples of someone on a show that he knows, a show that he watches, that, which I still have to check out because I haven't had a chance to see it yet, where the person is like, no matter what, I get what I want, like no matter what happens, he's like, he just knows he just doesn't like worry about it. He's like, nope, that's going to be mine. No, I'm going to be rescued. No, this is going to happen. No, that's going to happen. Which is a really great analogy. I think it's an excellent analogy with seeing ourselves in this life and, a character we could play. So I think I'm like, well, yeah, that is a better, seems like a better idea to me, because you're going to get obviously less incidences that would be unpleasant potentially. And all of this is obviously from my perspective. But then I started thinking about it, and I'm like, well, if you're a hero, what happens to a hero? I'm like, well, heroes, like, they meet all kinds of challenges, all kinds of like really major, huge challenges. In fact, that's what happens to heroes, is they always get these massive challenges. So I'm like, well, hold on, is even that a good idea, playing that kind of character even? And then what was funny is, because at the same time that one of them's coming out with a villain, the other one's coming out with a hero, I'm at the exact same time going through this thing where I'd actually been watching one of Joseph Rodriguez's videos, and he had mentioned Emmet Fox's book, which I'm sure lots of you probably know as well, called The 7-Day Mental Diet: How to Change Your Life in a Week, which obviously has a very enticing title to it. And even though I've read like tons and tons of new age, new thought teachers from that age, which is the Neville and the Joseph Murphy and, just tons of other people out there. And so many of them had been really brilliant. I hadn't actually read this one yet. So I read it, and immediately, because I had been in the middle of creating a better version of me as another character, me as having the things that I wanted, right? So I'd been in the middle of doing that when that came up, and I'm like, I read it and I'm like, yes. So I immediately put its principles to work. And basically what it is it's like, for 1 week, instead of identifying as all these other things, identify yourself as the creator. Well, what is that? That's love. That's bliss. That's peace. That's fulfillment. So I'm like, yeah, instead of envisioning myself as another character in the play, getting more stuff, what if I just envision myself as the aspects of the creator, what that actually is, because the creator isn't like a character in the film, in the movie. It's just these things, which aren't things, but, there's no way to really put that into words, are there? So I started doing it. And I've always been kind of like where I will like bliss out and just be in these, I spend a lot of time in that state, just because I find it really helpful. But, during the day, I'll be like, well, I got to take care of business. I got to take care of stuff. I got stuff to do. So when you tend to find out like later on, several hours later, you're like, oh, I really pulled myself out of that mindset where I'm like, oh, I got to get this stuff done and do it. So I stopped doing that. And I literally was just like, no, this is the number one, because that's what it says. It's like, this is the number one thing. The number one thing. Nothing's more important than this. During this 1 week, nothing is more important than you being that bliss. I am bliss. I am love. I'm peace. I'm fulfillment. Whichever one you want to choose. I tended to really kind of concentrate on bliss and on love. And I'm glad that I've kind of done work on seeing myself that way before, so it was pretty easy for me. So I started doing that, which not only is a cool idea, but it feels amazing, because I'm always like, well, I'd love to stay in that space all the time, but oh gosh, there's this other stuff I gotta do. And literally, after just 2 days of doing it, before I'd even reached the 7th day, and I think I'm on day 4 of doing it, I got this message from somebody, and they're like, oh, you know, I'm going to pay for you to travel. What? Yeah. You can go to Hong Kong, you can go to Bali, you can go to all these places that I've been wanting to go to and stuff. They're like, yeah, I'm going to pay for you. You know, I got basically this free like world trip. And then I got a chunk of money as well. And I'm like, well, I mean, like this like happened yesterday, right? So I was like, that was 2 days. And those were like things that weren't even like specifically, I mean, like they were, but it wasn't like specifically that I'm like, I want these things, you know. I wasn't saying I want a world trip, you know, or trip around the world kind of thing. But there it was. And I'm like, you think I'm going to persist? Oh yes, oh yes, please. So, which all kind of circled around to this thing is, okay, so is it better to play a character as your identity in this play, in the play of 3D, right? Is it better to play a character, a better version of you, or maybe even a completely different version of you? Or is it actually better to see yourself as the one and only? Because otherwise, you're in the world of opposites. And with the world of opposites, the world of duality, you know, there's always backlash. There's always things that are going to come up. So I'm like, well, what if you remove yourself from it and you're just playing that character, who you really are to begin with? Playing bliss. I'm bliss. I am love. I am the states of God, states of the Creator, states of source energy. You know, what is it? Just be it. And then, I mean, we'll see what else happens here, but then it's like, all things are done for you, aren't they? So, yeah, interesting. So I just wanted to kind of share those things with you guys, as just to, like I said, just to not only give a shout out to people who I think are worth giving a shout out to, and like I said, also, if you guys have people that inspire you, go ahead and write them in the comment section so other people can know about them too and can check them out as well. That can also, if you like, include books that have inspired you. I think I've done most everything. Obviously, there's been books. There's been a lot of audio books and stuff. I think there's been very few actual physical books that I've had. I just go online. I'm like, did they have a free PDF of that, or is someone reading that book, you know, on YouTube? And then I'm just like, because now I can have it right now. And of course, we all want things right now. So anyway, I hope that stuff has helped you guys out, and let me know what you think about it. And thanks for being here with me once again on Rebuild Reality. Like I said, I do have my website coming up pretty soon here. But like I said, I'll also try and let you guys know the day that launches, which should be very, very soon. And you know, for people who want it, for people who need it, hopefully everything that I do here is enough and you guys won't even need that. But I understand sometimes people need that personal perspective, or, you know, pull me out, you know, I'm drowning, pull me out now, you know, kind of thing. So it's always good for us to always have that option. So anyway, thanks for liking, subscribing, doing all that stuff that you do, if you want to do. And I'm going to see you guys here next time. And I do look forward to it on Rebuild Reality.